vaccines to stop the spread of diseases like polio and measles, spearheading life-saving research into cures for cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and much more. At the core of all of this work is, of course, science. The head of the HHS must believe in science to keep people healthy and believe the experts, not conspiracy theories. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. does not meet that very simple requirement. It's not just that he doesn't believe in science and trust our experts. He actively undermines them. RFK Jr. is one of the top spreaders of misinformation about vaccines, peddling bogus conspiracy theories that these safe and effective protections for Americans are somehow harmful. In fact, he said once that no vaccine is safe and effective. Well, I'll bet the tens of millions of people who have not come down with polio or measles or mumps and many other diseases because of vaccines would beg to differ. But his dangerous theories do not stop at vaccines. He's peddled claims that Wi-Fi causes cancer. He's called life-saving research into HIV and AIDS phony and blamed school shootings on antidepressants. These theories may sound preposterous, but when we're talking about the leading health official in our country, they undercut the hard work of scientists and doctors who have dedicated their lives to keeping Americans safe and well. He's also threatened to downsize the National Institute of Health, which works every day to find life-saving breakthrough treatments and cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, as well as so many other illnesses that impact millions of American families. Take it from me, somebody who spent months in a hospital bed as a child. I know the consequences of not protecting our kids from serious illness. I know the toll it takes on a family, both emotionally and financially. I also know what it's like to have science-backed medicine and great health care. Americans deserve a leading health official who believes in science, not conspiracies. And I urge my colleagues to ask themselves a simple question. Will this nominee keep your constituents safe or hurt them? For Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I think that the answer is clear. And I urge my colleagues, all of them, on behalf of families in their state, to oppose his nomination.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Thank you for always advocating for health care and for public health. Now I want to introduce somebody that really gave me a lift during this campaign. We're not, it's hard to count votes. People are holding stuff close to their vest. And at one point we had very few Democrats that had come out. And then I went online and I saw Senator Chris Murphy laying the wood to this nomination. And that's what he's going to do right now. Senator Chris Murphy.
You're raising expectations. That's really the worst thing you could do at a press conference. Listen, there are very few people in the United States of America who are less qualified to lead the Department of Health and Human Services than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You could literally walk down the street and the first 100 people you'd find would be less dangerous at the head of HHS than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Why? Not just because he is overtly hostile to vaccines. I met with him for a half an hour. It was a stunning half an hour in which he told me to my face he's not anti-vaccine. And so I read to him the litany of things he has said, like there's no safe vaccine, and then all of the individual things he said about individual vaccines and how unsafe they are. For Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to say he's not anti-vaccine, he's just pro-science, it's kind of like a pyromaniac saying, well, I'm not an arsonist, I just set fires to buildings every day, right? Right? He will get people killed. He will get people killed. And more than that, what he has shown is that he is just wildly open to believing any medical conspiracy theory that is put in front of him. Tammy told you, and others probably told you, some of the ideas he has that he defended to me in my office. The idea that guns don't have much to do with school shootings. It's really about kids getting treated for mental illness. When we treat kids for depression, that's what causes school shootings. He defended that view to me. He believes that there are chemicals in our water that turn kids gay. He defended that idea to me in our meeting. You do not want a secretary of HHS who is going to believe on a daily basis whatever new medical conspiracy theory is popular on the internet. That's the last person you want in charge of this nation's healthcare. Now listen, I think the drug companies make way too much money, but I don't want to stop drug discovery in this country. What did RFK Jr. say? He said if he goes to head up the Department of Health and Human Services, he's going to tell the FDA to take a break on drug development and drug discovery for 8 years. Right? Those breakthroughs save lives. They cure diseases. And the idea that you're going to have somebody in HHS who is hostile writ large to the FDA is an abomination. And finally, don't believe for 1 second that he's going to stand up to Donald Trump on anything. Donald Trump has made it 100% clear that his goal is to pass a massive tax cut for billionaires and corporations. And by the way, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is one of those really rich people who will benefit from that tax cut. And he's going to pay for it by gutting Medicare, Medicaid, and health care services for the middle class. If he gets away with that, Bobby Kennedy will get a nice big tax cut and will have done nothing to stop it. So it is really important that we raise our voices today, tomorrow, and this week. We have a chance to stop this nomination. Right? And there are circumstances where if you stop one Trump nominee, it may be a temporary victory, but Trump is just going to nominate somebody as bad or worse. That's virtually impossible when it comes to RFK Jr., right? If you beat RFK Jr., the chances are you will still get somebody pretty bad, but you won't get somebody who's going to kill as many people as RFK Jr. will. So thank you for being here. Thanks to Protect Our Care for everything you do. Let's go out and sound the alarm this week and next week. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Senator Murphy. And as expected, he laid the wood to this nomination. So our next speaker knows a little bit about health care, knows a little bit about the research that goes in to infectious diseases, and knows a little bit about what NIH, CDC, and other healthcare research does for the American people, the cures that it finds, the vaccines that it creates. He represents a lot of those people. The great senator from the state of Maryland, Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Brad. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brad. And I just want to start by thanking all of you who care about public health, who care about the future of people in our country, for being here now to raise the alarm about how RFK Jr., if he ever got close to being the Secretary of HHS, would put the American public at risk. And as you've heard and as you know, people will die. Now, I represent the great state of Maryland, which is home to the National Institutes of Health. It's home to the FDA. It's home to other federal health agencies. And we knew that public health in America and medical research in America was off to a rocky start when in the earliest days of the Trump administration, they essentially put a freeze on all communications coming out of HHS. In other words, public health warnings, trying to make sure that people were educated and informed about health threats. They put a stop to all of that. So Senator Alsobrooks, my new partner in the Senate, Congressman Raskin and I have written to the new administration to say, stop putting people's health care at risk, restore those communications. But as I think all of you know, there's still essentially a gag order, and internally there's huge fear throughout these federal agencies about just continuing their ongoing work to help the American people. And that's even before we have the hearings on RFK Jr. He has said that he would walk into NIH and immediately toss 600 people out and bring 600 of his people in. That will put the NIH and American healthcare at great risk. And we know, and as Senator Murphy and others have already said, all of you know, his position on vaccinations will result in killing people. It's killed people in Samoa. It will kill people in the United States. I want to read a quote here from somebody who spoke to the country almost over 60 years ago. Here's the quote. "I hope that the renewed drive to provide vaccination for all Americans, and particularly those who are young, will have the wholehearted support of every parent in America." That was John F. Kennedy calling upon parents throughout the country to make sure their kids get vaccinated to protect them from polio and other diseases. His nephew did not get the message. In fact, he's doing the opposite, which is why as we gather here, we say that RFK Jr. is not only unqualified, he's clearly not qualified, but it's worse than that because he would pose a danger to the American public. So when Senator Murphy says you can go down the street and the first 100 people you find would be equally qualified, he's right. But they're not equally dangerous to the public health. And that's what we have right now in RFK. Now, I think all of you probably saw the letter from Caroline Kennedy the other day. She pointed out, and I quote, that her cousin Bobby, RFK Jr., quote, vaccinates his own children while building a following by hypocritically discouraging other parents from vaccinating theirs, unquote. I don't know if he just doesn't believe in vaccinations or whether he's doing it, as his cousin Caroline Kennedy said, as a shtick to make a lot of money. Either way, it is a danger to the country. And we need to make sure that we stop this nomination. I think we can. I think in talking to some of my Republican colleagues, there are grave concerns about what him being Secretary of HHS would mean to the public health and medical research in this country. But we need to do everything we can to make sure that they hear that message. And that's why your being here today is so important. So let's keep at it. Let's raise the alarms, and let's protect the United States of America from the crazy conspiracy theories of RFK Jr., which will result in killing Americans. Thank you all for being part of this effort.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. And I think it's important to note what he said. I mean, RFK Jr. has to be defeated. He's dangerous. He'll kill people. He killed people in Samoa. But we're going to have a fight on our hands either way. So we've had a great panel of senators, all of which are going to leave now and go lobby their Republican colleagues to vote against RFK Jr. We have some great advocates, scientists, doctors. With that, I want to introduce Peter Lorre, President and Executive Director for the Center for Science in the Public Interest. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you, everybody, and good morning. My name is Peter Lurie. I'm a physician. I'm a former associate commissioner at the Food and Drug Administration, and now the head of the Center for Science of Public Interest. And we're a group that works mostly on food. And so a lot of people come up to me and they say, well, RFK's got a lot of good things to say about food. You're the guy who got red 3 out of the food supply, right? Aren't you with RFK? No, I'm not. He doesn't show even the remotest understanding of how food additives come onto the market. He doesn't show any understanding of what it is that keeps America safe. Heck, when it comes to food, Senator Schatz understated the problem. He said he's going to send us back 50 years. No. It's more like 100. He'd rather send us back to days when milk was not pasteurized. He would rather send us back to days when there were no vaccinations and children were dying, and adults. That's the greatest advances in public health in the last 100 years are the very things that he wishes to turn his back on. What's more, even if he comes up with a good idea, say on food once in a while, he's only right in the sense that a stop clock is right twice a day. Because the things that he's advocating for, they won't even happen under the current administration. Do you really think that the current administration is going to stand for a pro-regulatory approach to taking food additives that are dangerous off the market? Do you really think that the food industry, which overwhelmingly donated money to the Republicans in the last election, that food industry is going to stand for an attack on ultra-processed foods or on the food additives that have allowed them to make enormous profits? His bad ideas may happen, but the occasional good one will not. Now, we heard the senator say that you could find a bunch of people walking down the streets in this town who would be less dangerous to the American people than RFK. And I think that's true. Now, I'm a science guy, so I'm going to try a test. Let's see if you can get this right. Let me ask you this. Does HIV cause AIDS? Yeah, it does. Do germs cause infectious disease? Yeah. They do. Do vaccines cause autism? No. Does ivermectin treat COVID? No. Do the dietary supplements that he is selling, making a buck off, have they been shown to be safe and effective by the FDA? No. You all passed the test. 5 out of 5. RFK Jr. gets a 0. That is why his appointment, his nomination needs to be turned down. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter. All right. Next, I want to introduce someone with a group that few groups in the country do more to protect our democracy and help the American people than Public Citizen. I want to introduce Rob Weissman, co-president of Public Citizen.
As we've heard today, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a clear and present danger to American public health. He shouldn't be allowed within 500 feet of the Department of Health and Human Services, let alone be put in charge of it. He is a conspiracist and an anti-science crusader. One thing that means is that he plays fast and loose with the truth. That's core to what he is and what he does. So when he says, I'm not anti-vaccine, there's no reason to believe him, just look at what he said. When he says, I won't come after your vaccines, no reason to believe him. But worse, not only is he going to try to do that, by spreading disbelief in science and conspiracy theories, even if he takes no regulatory measures at all, he's going to undermine public commitment to vaccination. A Robert F. Kennedy secretary will undermine our core public health institutions and undermine public belief in public health. People will die in this country and many, many more will die overseas if he is made Secretary of Health and Human Services. Robert Kennedy talks a big game on Big Pharma. Big game on Big Pharma. There is no organization that is more critical of Big Pharma than Public Citizen. So I wanted to clarify what I think it means when he is critical of Big Pharma. When we talk about Big Pharma monopolies, we mean prices need to be lowered so people can get access to essential medicines. When we talk about Big Pharma having too much influence at the FDA, we mean standards need to be uplifted and pharma influence downgraded. When we talk about Big Pharma not pursuing a proper research agenda, we mean there are neglected diseases that don't turn a profit for Big Pharma, and we need more R&D directed there. When Robert Kennedy says those things, when he says there's a monopoly, and Big Pharma's got a monopoly, he means they're excluding, which they're not, but luckily our regulations do, they're excluding from approval unproven treatments. When he says there should be independence at the FDA, he means the FDA should lower its standards, reduce its reliance on science, and let onto the market with FDA stamp of approval unproven and quack therapies. RFK is not an opponent of Big Pharma. He is an opponent of science. He is an opponent of public health. There is no U.S. senator who believes he is qualified for this job. There is no U.S. senator who thinks it. And there is no U.S. senator who should vote to approve Robert Kennedy to be Secretary of Health and Human Services.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, and thank you, Public Citizen. With that, I want to introduce someone, Scott Hamilton Kennedy, by the way, no relation, and the only Kennedy we want to hear from on Capitol Hill today. Scott is an Academy Award-nominated filmmaker and director of the Shot in the Arm documentary. Scott?
Good morning. He did some of my intro for me, so thank you very much. Yes, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and with my latest film, Shot in the Arm, I had the opportunity to research and expose Robert Kennedy Jr. for what he is. He is a fraud, and he's been spreading misinformation and confusion and fear for decades. His disregard for scientific consensus and verifiable truth is very, very dangerous. Science and democracy thrive on the free exchange of ideas, empirical evidence, and accountability, all of which Robert Kennedy Jr. repeatedly undermines while refusing to subject his own claims to the same rigorous scrutiny. With HHS, essential work such as public health surveillance, medical research, drug approval, guidance, this institution directly and indirectly affects virtually every citizen on the planet, not just in the United States. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s deep character flaws make him unfit to lead an institution as important as HHS. I'll keep this short. I want to thank all the speakers here today and Protect Our Care for the courage to commit to public health and an informed democracy. That's what this is about. And Governor Green, I know he's gone now, but I especially want to thank him for the work he did in Samoa. And I ask all the senators to take a look at our Samoa sequence in Shot in the Arm. You can see it on all of my socials, Scott Hamilton Kennedy, and at shotinthearmmovie.com. And you'll see him literally squirming and obfuscating and dodging every question and to not admit what he did in Samoa and the harms he caused. And lastly, if I still have time, I'd like to slip in a few questions for some of the senators. So, Mr. Kennedy, you've stated often that you're not anti-vax. So can you do us a simple favor and name us, hopefully plural, all of the vaccines you're for? Because if I say that I'm not anti-fruit and I can't name a piece of fruit that I like, I think I'm anti-fruit. So if he can't name a single vaccine that he says works, it's awful. And to put that in context, everyone, the World Health Organization estimates that over just the past 50 years, vaccines have saved over 54 million lives around the world. Mr. Kennedy, we just heard, well said, Peter, about his hypocrisy on pharma, that he says he's very critical of big pharma medicines. But will he show us his medicine cabinet? Or is he a hypocrite? Will he show us his receipts to see what he and his family actually buy? I don't think he will. And lastly, he said several times that he would change his mind and admit he was wrong when presented with evidence. Simple question. Can you please share one time ever that you admitted you were wrong and you changed your mind? Robert Kennedy Jr. is not just corrupt, he is corrosive, and he must not be made head of HHS. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Scott. And I'm telling you, everyone, go find this clip of RFK Jr. in this documentary. Go find it. No one I've ever seen has looked more uncomfortable that wasn't in court. And they did a phenomenal job. And I wish every senator would see that clip as well. With that, I want to introduce Dr. Jan Krummas, like hummus. Dr. Jan Krummas with Doctors for America, which has been, along with Nurses for America and so many other advocates, has been in this fight with us ever since the minute this nomination was announced. Dr. Krummas?
Thank you very much. And we'd like to thank Protect Our Care for giving us, practicing clinicians, the ability to speak to the American people. I am a physician, and I represent today 27,000 physicians. We represent all specialties in all states, people from all levels of training, from doctors in training to people like myself, a clinician with decades of experience. We are nonpartisan. We take no money from industry. We take only the perspective of our patients. We are at the bedside, and that's the picture we know. And our only agenda is protecting our patients. Doctors for America opposes the confirmation of Robert Kennedy as Secretary of Health and Human Services in the strongest of possible terms. We have studied and evaluated both his statements and his actions, and we have concluded that his inability to understand scientific data, that his use of a public platform over the period of 20 years to jeopardize public health for his own enrichment is disqualifying for the position that he seeks. We've read his opening statement where he talks about his good intentions, and I cannot judge and we cannot judge his intentions, but we have studied the impact of his statements and his actions on health and what is done to our patients. And what we have seen is a huge drop in vaccination rates. The last school year, 2023 to 2024, 39 states had kindergartners who had not reached the threshold of vaccination of 95%. And what does that mean? That means that the risk for an outbreak is growing by the minute. I was in Philadelphia in 1991 during that measles outbreak, and I would like to say to Senators McCormick and Fetterman, the senators from Pennsylvania, that we saw children die. Children have had encephalitis that is chronic and untreatable as a result of that outbreak. And what I will say to every senator is that the change between 1991 and 2024 is that 1 in every 6 adults in America is immunocompromised. They can be immunocompromised because of disease or because of revolutionary new treatments that we are using every day. And the next measles outbreak is not going to kill just children. It's going to kill mothers, fathers, grandmothers, and grandfathers. And I would ask every senator to consider that possibility. We know what Kennedy has said about the COVID vaccination, that it is a dangerous and the most dangerous vaccine. We, as clinicians who were practicing and working with people during that time, know that vaccines saved 3 million Americans. And I would like to note that if the American public followed Kennedy's advice, those people would no longer be with us. We are particularly concerned about the fact that he denies that HIV is the agent of AIDS. And again, I'd like to speak to my Pennsylvania senators, Senator Fetterman and Senator McCormick. Robert Gallo at Jefferson University Hospital was among the first scientists in the world to identify the etiologic agent of AIDS. Do you deny American science and what it has brought us? Do you want to identify with the likes of Mbeki, who, as president of South America, also denied that HIV was the agent of AIDS, and it resulted in over 330,000 excess deaths? We are also very concerned about his ongoing work with Gardasil. It has been a long time a dream to have a vaccine against cancer, and we have one. The vaccine for human papillomavirus will eradicate 90% of cervical cancer, vulvar cancer, vaginal cancer. I've been at the bedside of patients who have suffered through those cancers. Would you really confirm, as Secretary of Health and Human Services, someone who's not just trying to get people not to get this vaccine, but is a profiteer in the area of this vaccine, where his website, Children's Health Defense, lures people in the most vulnerable state who don't have the medical knowledge to assess what he's saying, lures them into his realm of vaccine disbelief, and he makes money referring those patients to litigators in a class action suit against this valuable vaccine. We understand that vaccines have side effects, but we also understand that the greater good and the saving of lives is something that we discuss with our patients in an informed way, not to make money and profiteer from their vulnerability. And so I ask every senator to stand with our patients, stand with the health of Americans, and vote against this confirmation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. With that, I want to introduce somebody from a group that is very special to us, has been recently special to us. It's been a real partner in this work. 314 Action, if you don't know, helps select scientists, doctors, nurses, yes, scientists, right there, people from public health sector to elective office. They, of course, supported Governor Green, and they've been a big part of Governor and Dr. Green's advocacy. They have produced ads. We jointly released a poll this morning that shows how unpopular RFK Jr.'s nomination is and how unpopular his positions are. So with all of that introduction, I want to introduce Dr. Andre Ostrovsky of 314 Public Action. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I've got my little helpers here because they didn't have school, so here we are, me being a dad. My name is Dr. Andre Ostrovsky. I'm the former Chief Medical Officer of the National Medicaid Program. I also am a fundraiser for and donor to 314 Action to get physicians elected to office. But today I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a pediatrician and as a dad. I doctor up the street here at a federally qualified health center, Mary Center, as a pediatrician. I spent 7 years at Children's National Medical Center, and I trained up at Boston Children's Hospital and Boston Medical Center, where I was teaching faculty at Harvard Medical School. I have trained and I have practiced at some of the best institutions in the world. I have seen the sickest of the sick. Some illnesses in children are not preventable. Sometimes bad luck just happens, and as a parent, I've seen this firsthand. My kids have broken arms and they've had burns in their legs requiring hospitalization, and that felt horrible. I felt incredibly guilty, even though those are fluke accidents. I know there was no one to blame, but I still felt bad that I couldn't protect them. I've also had patients in the hospital for entirely preventable reasons, like not being vaccinated. For the parents of those kiddos, heavy is the back that carries the guilt. I had a patient that was a 5-year-old little boy who 1 week prior was happily bouncing around a soccer field, and the following week became paralyzed from measles. He contracted measles, developed encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, and now is wheelchair bound and needs a feeding tube for the rest of his life because his parents decided not to vaccinate him for measles. Heavy is the back that carries that guilt. I had another patient that was an adorable little girl. She was 2 years old that ended up in the intensive care unit because of coughing fits because of pertussis. The coughing caused her to fracture a rib that then poked a hole in her lung. My colleagues in the ICU had to use a scalpel to make a cut in her chest just so they could insert a tube to reinflate that lung. And that is all because the parents decided not to vaccinate her against pertussis. Heavy is the back that carries the guilt. I had yet another patient who was a 12-month-old adorable baby boy that became paralyzed due to tetanus. The little munchkin had to be put on a ventilator, a breathing machine, because his little diaphragm was paralyzed from tetanus toxin and he couldn't breathe on his own. The baby then suffered brain damage because of lack of oxygen, and he will have learning disabilities for the rest of his life because his parents decided not to vaccinate him against tetanus. Heavy is the back that carries the guilt. The parents seem to follow the same sad story arc. They read something about vaccines causing autism, and they get scared, so they decide not to vaccinate. But these parents aren't to blame. I underscore, we as scared parents will read pretty much anything and get scared and potentially take action on that. They got bad information from sources they thought they could trust. They got misinformation from charlatans like RFK Jr. RFK Jr.'s track record of spreading misinformation about vaccines is very well documented. You've heard it all morning. And his back should be crushing from carrying that guilt. There are other Republicans who actually have the qualifications to run HHS, by the way. If we need a recommendation, I doubt that Trump will take this, but I'd recommend a colleague and friend, the former Republican Senate Majority Leader, Dr. Bill Frist. We don't align on policy issues, but he leads with science. He's a competent leader, and he actually cares about human beings, not about enriching himself. I implore you, please do not confirm RFK Jr.'s appointment to HHS Secretary. He is the shell of the man that once cared about the environment. He is the shameful smear on the name of a great American family that once honored science and public service. And he is the frail and fading ghost of an unchecked ego that desperately grasps to sensationalism as if it were the life preserver, keeping him from drowning into irrelevance. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ostrowski and children. Thank you so much. With that, I want to turn it over to a real partner in all of this work, a partner in all the work that we do in healthcare and numerous other issues, and that is, I want to introduce Andrea Dukas with the Center for American Progress.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So we've heard all morning, again, about how dangerous and unqualified RFK Jr. is, uniquely unqualified RFK Jr. is for the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I am a public health professional. I've dedicated my career and my education to public health and trying to protect public health. So what I want to just remind folks of is a little bit of the history of how we've gotten here as a country and some of the most incredible public health advances we've experienced as a global society and as the United States of America. So when we think about what it takes to make Americans healthy, right, and we think about the leaps and bounds that we've made to date, there are just a few examples of innovations that don't even feel like major innovations, but we benefit from them every day, from day to day, every day, that stand out. One is hand washing, right? We've been able to extend lives just by washing hands because we understood that germs were on hands and germs cause disease, right? Another is antibiotics, right? We have medicines that actually help people when they're sick, when there's a bacterial infection. The third is vaccination. And this is a tool we've had in crude ways, for hundreds of years. When you think about American innovation and Americans' national security, you can look back to George Washington and what he did to try to inoculate troops against smallpox so that they could actually be a successful army, right? In just my lifetime, I've only been around 40 years, but in just my lifetime, we've developed vaccines against chickenpox, Gardasil, which is incredible. It gives me chills to think that we actually have a vaccination that can eliminate cervical cancer. This is incredible. Additionally, we have medicines that have helped cure hepatitis C, that have helped dramatically slow and limit the ability to spread HIV or contract AIDS. And it is so deeply personally offensive to me that the best person we could have chosen to potentially lead the Department of Health and Human Services, whose job it is to keep Americans safe, is somebody who doesn't believe in any of those things. Someone who is anti-modern medicine, anti-science, who again would take us back to a time where we would just see what happens. And it is unconscionable to me that the people who would pay the price of making that kind of decision, it's not RFK Jr. and the folks who are sort of at his echelon. It's kids. It's little kids. It's scared parents. It's American families who are just trying to do right day by day and make the best decisions for them, who are having to compete with just a deluge of misinformation that's intentionally designed to scare them so that someone can turn a profit. And that is just absolutely unconscionable. So along with my peers, along with many of you today, I also ask our senators, please, please, please confirm anyone but RFK Jr. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. That wraps up our program. I want to thank everybody, excuse me, I want to thank everybody for coming. But this is not the end. We're not at the beginning either, but there's a confirmation hearing today, confirmation hearing tomorrow. There's still a vote in the Finance Committee, which we're not sure when that's going to come. And then there's a vote on the floor. And then there's the wait. If anybody was paying attention to all the stories that came out yesterday, the Washington Post story, the Wall Street Journal editorial, Rupert Murdoch doesn't want RFK Jr. To be HHS Secretary. New York Post had 3 editorials or articles yesterday. The Wall Street Journal has had numerous editorials. The Washington Post. I think that's a sign that we should wrap up. But I just want to say this: call your senators. Every senator needs to hear from you, Democrat and Republican, but mostly obviously on the Republican side. This is what RFK Jr. did in Samoa. Don't let him do it at scale. Stop RFK. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your remarks. Phenomenal. And 314, 314, put your remarks.